But, of course, this isn't any leader. This is Keir Starmer, a man with a PhD in doing the wrong thing when the right thing was staring him in the face. And we now know, as I mentioned at the top there, that this man is claiming to be at the centre of a Zionist pylon. It's a campaign against him. He, apparently, is now the victim. And all of this going on while Labour resist calls for him to be stripped of his British citizenship and deported over the many things, thousands of things, that he's said over the years. To discuss this and the other big stories of the day, Benedict Spence is in with us, political commentator, an all-round festive joy. Good to see you, Benedict.
Hello.
Nice to have you with us. I mean, this is one of those stories that you sort of look at it and then you step back and look at it again and go, have I missed something here? Is there something I'm not seeing? So we know about what this man thinks, the kind of allegiances he has, who he supports, who he hates, who he wants dead, white people, police. Dutch, he doesn't like the Dutch people. I mean, Dutch people never did anything to anybody, for goodness sake. But no, well, there's a debate there, perhaps. But there is still, to me, this irredeemable reality of Keir Starmer keeping this tweet up. I can't get over that because I think that's rather significant.
Well, I think it shows that there's absolutely no intention of reverse ferreting on this. The decision has been made and they feel very strongly and proudly about it. And it's not really for us, is the important thing to understand. It's not been sent deliberately to wind any of us up, although I suspect they must have thought there was a chance of that happening. It's been sent to signal to other constituencies, if you like, in the UK, that they are good eggs and that they're doing the right thing. And it's two groups in particular. It is the large Muslim minority in this country that is very important in lots of Labour constituencies. Have to remember that. The other is the international legal community, which, you know, we mention, don't we, of course, often enough, that Keir Starmer is, was, at the very least, a high-flying lawyer, and he surrounds himself with very prominent international human rights lawyers, people like Philip Sands and the Attorney General, Lord Hermer. This is who they're talking to. They're talking to a group of people who belong to that sort of cadre, for whom this sort of thing is the most important thing you can possibly do. If there is an activist anywhere in the world who's been imprisoned by any government, they take it upon themselves to say, this person must be a good person and it is in our interest to free them, because of course they're a good person. They're fighting the system. Doesn't matter what they've actually done. Doesn't matter what the system is. This is what they see as being an important thing, as being a priority. And I think we need to remember that. This is not a government that is really working for ordinary people. It has interests in certain groups, one of which is literally, I think, an international legal group.
I think that's probably true, actually. So they're kind of ticking different boxes on this. And Starmer's calculation, one assumes, from what you've just said, Benedict, is that he stands to gain more doing it that way than doing it the other way. The rest of us can go to hell, basically.
Basically, and I think
with our strange requests.
And this is, I really do think that it needs to be sort of emphasised again and again and again. The worldview that is espoused by people like Keir Starmer, that is adhered to, is in some ways I feel bad actually even saying legal, because it's not even the worldview of the average barrister out there.
Correct.
It is a certain kind of individual who sees themselves not as a lawyer but as a human rights lawyer, better than the ordinary, better than all else and sundry, and that they have some sort of higher calling, higher principles that adhere to them. So freeing people like this, being able to go between governments, being able to achieve things on this sort of scale, is, I think, seen as very important to them. It is a status thing. It is about achievement. It is a moral demonstration as much as anything else. Even if the rest of us are sat here going, hang on, what on earth has this person got to do with Britain? Why are they British? What does this say about being British or the value of British citizenship? That doesn't matter to people like Keir Starmer.
It's beyond extraordinary. I bang on about this all the time, and I did yesterday. I always have to put the caveat in that I'll continue to do so as well. We don't have. There's no incredulity. There's no anger from our leaders. I mean, he's used the word abhorrent. His latest tweet, post on X, says Yvette Cooper, the Foreign Secretary, of course, has set out in her letter the historic tweets by this man. They are absolutely abhorrent. That's as animated as he gets. They're abhorrent. With the rise of anti-Semitism and recent horrific attacks, I know this has added to this distress of many in the Jewish community in the UK. We are taking steps to review the information failures in this case. This man should have walked out of number 10, Benedict. He should have been pulling his hair out with anger. He should have been saying, I don't know what's gone wrong here, no idea what's happened. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. This man is not one of us. He's not British, not really. He's not wanted here. His tweets are outrageous. That's what we wanted to hear.
It needs to be said, this man is not British. In no way, shape or form is he British. And the fact that you can just pick up British citizenship quite as easily as this person has for such a niche reason, and that nobody in the administration of this country sees any problem with that, I think speaks a great deal to quite how much the value of British citizenship has been completely eroded. It's an insult to all of us who were born in this country. It's an insult to those who work very hard to gain British citizenship, who move here because they wish to assimilate. The idea that this person who has no ties beyond the most tenuous can simply be given a British passport, and that is therefore the same as those of us who have been born and bred in this country, or those who have worked for swathes of their lives to become British. That's deeply insulting. Keir Starmer cannot, though, reverse ferret on this. He can't publicly do that, because the second that he does that, it is open season then on similar cases of people being given British citizenship for whom the rest of us then turn around and go, hang on, I'm not quite sure this person is particularly British. We had the Shamima Begum case. That was very sort of specifically related to terrorism charges, that you can remove somebody's citizenship for that. This individual has not, as far as we're aware, been accused of terrorism in the UK. So if it's for things like free speech violations or political views, then Labour doesn't want to go down that route, because the second you can take citizenship away from people for political views, oh boy, is that a lot of people who have come to this country. And I think that that's a very important thing to remember here. There are huge numbers of people in this country who have come here, who are living off the taxpayers' money, who are making the best of the benefits that this country offers, who are in no way, shape or form British. They are here because it is quite literally a financial arrangement. It is better financially for them to be in this country with the healthcare, with the education, with the infrastructure, which we all recognise is not as good as it used to be, but it's still a lot better than it is in other parts of the world. Those people are more than happy to take those things, but they have absolutely no interest in them becoming British or their children becoming British.
Absolutely. It's interesting, and again, a bit of a rinse and repeat moment from me, but can you imagine Donald Trump's reaction to if he discovered this person had come back into his country under the Biden administration, that they'd somehow ferried him through on a sort of technicality over citizenship? And you can see Trump standing either, in the Oval Office, the Rose Garden, or in the press room, wherever. He would be spitting feathers at this. He would be, whatever's happened, this man is not wanted. I'm going to do my best to make sure he's out. We don't get any of that. We have these neatly clipped, pre-prepared press releases cobbled together by spads in the Foreign Office and at number 10. These are abhorrent. We're going to try and get to the bottom of this. I mean, it's just woeful. It's not acceptable. These people haven't realised we're living in very different times now.
You're completely right that they haven't realised that public opinion has shifted.
Correct.
They still, I think a lot of civil servants, a lot of politicians, a lot in the media actually, still believe the average British person to be a Neanderthal to be managed, rather than a person with views to be listened to. It's all about, as you say, responses, optics. It's about managing it. Even Keir Starmer's response to what Alaa Abd El Fattah had actually said, he's framing it entirely through the prism of anti-Semitism. Now, they don't want to do that. The anti-Semitism thing has erupted in the UK since October 7th and the attack by Hamas on Israel. We all knew that it was bubbling under the surface, that people had come into this country with medieval views on Jews that were completely at odds with British culture, and that nothing had been done to tackle that. But they are having to address it now because it is being performed quite openly. But what's still really interesting is Alaa Abd El Fattah said pretty overtly, I don't like British people. He was talking about Brits, not Jews. He was also talking about Brits. The Prime Minister has not. Nobody from the government has come out and said, what he's saying about the actual country that he's supposedly a member of, is disgraceful. They can only do it through the prism of, oh, he's targeted a minority group. Well, that's abhorrent. But when it comes to the actual country, not a word.
There's loads of other stuff on that. He doesn't like the Brits, as I mentioned, the Dutch and the Germans he doesn't like either. He described British people as dogs and monkeys in a statement. He's denied the Holocaust. I mean, I could go on. It's almost It's almost, there's so much of this stuff. It's kind of like a parody. It's like someone has written a book about, the world's worst person, and here's what he said.
If Graham Linehan had created this person as a figure for a show, he'd have been arrested because it would have been considered too offensive, ironically.
At the airport, probably. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned about this sense of Britishness as well. This morning I did something I don't normally do, Benedict. I had to put on the oven gloves for this. I picked up The Guardian. And there it is. On their front page, 1 in 3 believe that Britishness is dependent on being born in the UK. And what's interesting about this, the number has doubled in 2 years that have this view, that research that warns of an increase in ethno-nationalism in Britain. I don't know why it has to warn about nationalism. Nationalism is not... doesn't have to be a pejorative. I mean, there could just be the sense that, you believe in a certain... there's a certain bullet point list, if you like, of Britishness, perhaps. Although a majority of the public still believe being British is rooted in shared values, a growing proportion see it as a product of ethnicity, birthplace and ancestry, according to analysis.
I think, well, 2 things, actually. I think it's very important to say that there are an awful lot of people born in this country who do not consider themselves British. And, I think we see that, frankly, we see that in the terrorism threat in this country. An awful lot of people who are terrorists, convicted of terrorists, or who are on watch lists right now, are born in the UK.
Correct.
So, by that definition of birthright...
777 bombers,
absolutely.
Manchester, the list goes on.
The irony is, very often people who are first-generation immigrants, or at least in the past, not so much now, I think, but once upon a time, it would have been their parents and grandparents who came, who tried to assimilate. And actually, I think when we get into the issue of birthright citizenship, it is dodgy because there are an awful lot of dual nationals who are born here, who frankly you'd look at and go, I'm not sure you are British at all, certainly not in terms of shared values. I think it's very important to say, ethnicity, of course, plays a role. It is a lie to say that Britain has a multicultural sense in the fact that it has always had a melting pot of all kinds of ethnic groups and cultures. That is not true. We've had 4 key ones, which we're all aware of, but they're fairly similar. And I think it's important to recognise that because that is where our culture has come from. It is the product of those 4 cultures, if we're being honest with you. To say, therefore, that because you had 4 cultures, that you should be open to all and sundry of the world to come and do what they want is not true. It is not acceptable, but it is also not right, I think, to say you have to have been born here. One of the great things about our culture, our civilization, why it is better than all of those others, is we have managed to transcend the bounds of ethnicity. If you want to come from abroad and you want to be British, it is possible. But the problem there lies in what the majority of people think is Britishness, shared values. For decades, we have been told very mixed things about what those values actually are, many of which do not necessarily correspond to what the average British person, either born here or migrant, views as being British. But
it seemed to work for some time. You look at the 50s, 60s, 70s, Windrush, South Asian families coming over from India being the obvious example. That really worked. I mean, of course, there were issues, but those people tended to come and assimilate. But a few generations later, some of the family of those people have gone kind of almost the other way.
I think in the immediate aftermath and the end of empire, there was still a shared sense of what Britishness was, and it was rooted in pride of what Britishness was. It was rooted in a shared sense of values which were founded on, I'm not a particularly sort of overt Christian or anything like that, but you have to be aware of the role that the Church of England played for centuries leading up to that. There's no question that that played a major role, but also, frankly, of, I don't say progressive in the sense of what it is used in today. I mean forward-facing, a nation that wanted to better itself, rather than a nation that has descended in on itself and is engaged in a round of punishment beatings for itself because it feels bad about empire, because it feels bad about poverty. That, I think, is what defined Britain then, which was, if nothing else, more optimistic and more assured of itself. Now it is neither of those things, and that then is, I think, is where you then see people regressing backwards, and also then when you get people of migrant backgrounds going, oh well, maybe things were back, better back where I came from. Maybe they did have a point back where I came from, and very often I think that that's grounded in conservative views of who we are, who they are. And I think it's a very important thing. As our country has veered more towards the progressive left,
Yeah.
and the idea of deconstructing identity, deconstructing all of these things and casting them off as evil and racist,
Yep.
well, then you don't have those shared points of reference anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is fair to say that when it comes to Abd El Fattah, there are thousands of him in the UK. They're all over the place, these people who hate this country, the values of this country. They purport to have allegiances elsewhere that are far greater than anything this whole place could offer, despite, of course, being the host country, offering shelter and food and goodness knows what else all over the place. Lines are open on this. What is Britishness in that respect? 1 in 3 believe Britishness is dependent on being born in the UK. That's probably a little skew-if and doesn't really tell an authentic or an intelligent story, but you understand the point. Your thoughts on that, 0344 499 1000. You can leave a voice note there as well. And back to the bigger issue, is Keir Starmer turning a blind eye to extremism? Lines are open, voice notes, calls, and messages on 87222. Yeah, good morning. It is Morning Glory with Ian Collins. So much together. We're talking about Keir Starmer. Is he turning a blind eye to extremism? What is Britishness? Has found its way on our agenda after the Guardian, for goodness sake. There it is, the Guardian of all publications. Not that they endorse their own headline, but the headline is 1 in 3 believe Britishness is dependent on being born in Britain. And it's fair to say, as we were just discussing with Benedict, there are lots and lots of people over the years from around the world who've come from all sorts of countries and have brilliantly assimilated in this country and do sing, to coin the phrase, from that same British hymn sheet. So it wouldn't be fair to say that you have to be born here to have that same sense of shared values. Some might argue, well, it would help. Thoughts on that as well. We're also talking about the BBC, Starmer, I mean, the whole list here. Anything you want to join in with, 0344 499 1000. On those points of Starmer and the BBC, let's get a voice note from Pete.
This government and also the BBC are both unbelievable. You know, they're the government, Starmer in particular, they're now like the old ostriches, sticking their head in the sand, aren't they? Because I don't think they know which way to turn on this thing with this bloody Al Fattah geezer. You know, they can't be. They must get rid of him. He must be let out of the country, gone, pushed out. As for the BBC, again, just carrying on as usual, hoping it's all going to go away. It's like the proverbial little kid sticks its fingers in its ears and goes la 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 when it doesn't want to hear anything. This government is tone deaf. The BBC are tone deaf. They're tone deaf to the people, and the people are not going to put up with much more of this.
Yeah, I think it makes a fair point, Benedict.
I think tone deaf is pretty much on the money. Yeah, that's, I think, as diplomatic as you can be about this. They're not listening. And the other thing that I think is actually sort of when you're talking about the BBC, but also Keir Starmer in the situation and the government's reaction to Alaa Abd El Fattah is actually the lack of curiosity, the lack of research that went into any of this. The number of Tory MPs who backed his bringing to the UK, who apparently did not have access to Google, or whose eyes and fingers weren't working that day, who were therefore unaware of what it was, who lacked the ability to ring up people in Egypt and say, now look here, chaps, is there anything perhaps, I don't know, a little racist or a little spicy that this guy might have said that might blow back on me later? The fact that so many people were happy to go along with this, and it took somebody on Twitter seeing the Prime Minister's message going, Abd El Fattah, why does that ring a bell? Oh my word, that's why it rings a bell.
He was the one that put the death to white people tweet out back in the day. You know, and we live in a world as well where you can't move without somebody checking your social media history. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's from the last week or last decade. I mean, there's headlines every day of people who are called to question over stuff they wrote, you know, back in the day on Facebook or Twitter, whatever. I mean, that's just a standard thing. The idea that just putting aside all of those previous Tory MPs and the previous administration, who, of course, were the ones that granted him the citizenship, today, number 10, who have an entire social media department. I mean, they employ people pretty much specifically for this kind of thing. To say, here, Reg. I doubt whether the person doing social media is called Reg at number 10, but let's say, for argument's sake, Reg, could you just check out the history of this fella? I mean, really? Nobody looked? Nobody thought, well, it wouldn't have taken you very long to find it.
But I think that speaks to the culture of politicians in this country and of civil servants. There is that lack of curiosity. There is that sort of just assumption that everything is going to be fine. And you know, maybe if just a little bit more groundwork was done in all walks of life when it comes to our politics, maybe there just wouldn't be the sheer number of gaffes that this government keeps walking into. But it's going to keep happening. There's going to be more of this sort of thing where it's simply the case that somebody, and when I say somebody, lots of people at all stages of this process haven't actually bothered to check what it is that these people are actually saying. But the key thing to remember here is, of course, it's not going to change anything. Ultimately, they, the government, see this as a net good. They see themselves going to another country, Egypt, and, you know, freeing somebody and saying, well, we've therefore freed them from the tyranny of whatever. I think they still, and will always, regardless of that person's view, look at that as a net positive.
Well, just to pick up on Pete's point in that voicemail about the sort of tone-deaf nature of institutions, the BBC, and this is the Gaza document. We remember the Gaza documentary, and this was kind of put out as a, you know, one of the few possibilities for a broadcaster to get inside Gaza and sort of tell the story through the lens of some of the younger citizens. What they didn't tell us, of course, was that the programme was presented by the son of a terrorist, which might have been handy to know before you sat down with your popcorn to have a look at what was going on over there. The person, I'm sure there were many people in charge and there would be a lot of blame game going on here, but Charlotte Moore was the corporation's chief content officer when this went out. It was called Gaza, How to Survive a War Zone. It was broadcast last February now, can you believe? She then left the BBC after this. They claimed, or she claimed, she didn't leave because of this, but the timing was, you know, slightly interesting. She's now been given an OBE. For her services to broadcasting. Now, you might think, even if she had a glowing CV, really, you know, she'd done some really good stuff back in the day on Panorama and God knows what else, that this one thing, they'd have said to her, look, Charlotte, any other day of the week, mate, we'd have given you the OBE, but bearing in mind the last thing as you walked out of the BBC door, as it closed behind you, the last thing you were involved with was that Gaza documentary. So we think the OBE might be a little bit of a bad fit. But they didn't do that. Not this year. We'll wait for a few years, and maybe you can do something in the charity sector, and then we'll give you the OBE. They didn't do that. They doubled down. I mean, the BBC don't hand out the OBE, but the system that does, which of course is all interlinked with the government, and the government say, well, it's not the government that make the decision, but you know what I'm saying. They still decided that she should get an OBE. Now, I find that this one story, and there's a few other examples which I'll come to in a moment, absolutely encapsulates what's wrong institutionally with the system.
I mean, apart from me, have you ever platformed an extremist on any of your shows? Have you ever given a voice to a dangerous lunatic? Apart from me.
Apart from you, Benedict. Yes. I mean, as in on purpose.
Yes.
And I'm thinking
not misleadingly or unknowingly. Or
no, I didn't like bring on Amjen Chowdhury back in the day, who came on a couple of times.
Well,
remember him?
I'm sorry to say, therefore, you're not going to get an OBE.
I'm not going to get an OBE. I wouldn't get one. Because they go, you platformed Amjen Chowdhury, didn't you, you little tinker? No, well, he came on in the context of being an extremist. He actually came in the studio one night with about 16 heavies with him. It was terrifying. And then I found myself in an uncomfortable situation where I was chairing a debate between him and Douglas Murray. And Douglas said to me, he said, I've just looked at the chairs in this studio. It wasn't in this place, it was for the Express. He said, I've just looked at the setup. According to that, I've got to sit next to him. I don't want to sit next to him. And I said, Douglas, you've got to do me a favour. Can you just, for the purpose of this, so this really uncomfortable thing took place, and it was awful. And Douglas Murray completely annihilated him, intellectually and otherwise. But yeah, I mean, he came on within the context of being an extremist.
I was going to say, actually, you should get an OBE for getting Douglas Murray to sit next to him.
To sit next to Amjen, that's OBE worthy, I think anybody could argue that.
But I think most people
for services to seating arrangements.
Yeah, most people, though, would recognise that this story is a very classic example of the system rewarding the people who prop up the system, and that actually it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. The very fact that you have the right views and you're in the system to begin with means that you will be rewarded for it. Every year, every year when there are gongs handed out, when there are honours handed out, there are people on that list who raise eyebrows. And we're always thrown a little bone as well.
Yes.
Oh, some tea lady somewhere who's been doing it for 40 years has been given a CBE or something like that, and you're sat there going, oh, well, isn't that nice? The little people get rewarded. But in return for that, it's any number of other people that you look at and you go, what on earth are any of these people doing on there? They oversee a systematic series of failures every year. But that is what the system does. It rewards itself, it pats itself on the back, and everything carries on as if it's hunky-dory.
This is like the editor of Panorama on the Trump documentary getting an OBE for services to creativity.
Which, to be fair, watch that space.
Yes, it was always next year. You know, we'd have forgotten all that stuff about the speech being doctored. We're going to take some more calls, more from Benedict coming up as well. 0344 499 1000. We've added another one to the list there. We've got the BBC. Britishness. Is Starmer turning a blind eye to extremism? Lines are open. Voicemails 0344 499 1000. 25 to 7. This is Talk. Oh 0344 499 1000. Anjem Chowdhury, by the way, is in jail now. He's still in jail. I think he's going to be there for a long, long time. Just in case you're thinking, whatever happened to Anjem? That's what happened to him. He's in the chiller. Lots to talk about here. We're going to talk about the issue of net zero. Are you ready? Have you got a net zero home? Are you heading yourself on almost a solo journey with your panels and your windmills to a net zero home? Energy Secretary Ed Miliband is clearly keen on this. He's accelerating his journey to get every house fit and proper for the revolution as he sees it. Let's have a listen to what he said when he talks about the whole issue of net zero and a way of, well, not just saving the planet, but saving money.
The truth is, our country remains in the grip of fossil fuel markets controlled by petrostates and dictators. That's why our energy bills are so high. There is an answer: clean, homegrown power that we control. But to bring it to people's homes, we need to build the transmission infrastructure to make that happen. Now, we believe that if you live close to that new grid infrastructure, you should see direct benefit in your energy bills. And with the plans we're announcing today, you'll get up to £250 a year off your bills. I know this won't satisfy everyone, but it is a recognition that if you host clean energy infrastructure, you should benefit from it.
Oh, get in the bin, you half-wit. Is there anyone in the country that has saved 200... Did anyone get 250 quid back, 300 quid back from this journey that Ed Miliband's on? I mean, he just appears to be... He's a bull that's on this kind of... He's been let loose. And someone said, like, hey, there you go, there's a big budget, there's a ton of money there. Just get the panels on, get the windmills up, and we'll cross our fingers and hope something great happens. And they're trying to get this in, you know, new-built homes so that eventually... I think the plan is no one will ever pay for their energy other than the cost of the infrastructure.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen.
No.
And it's insane. And the funny thing is, when it comes to things like solar infrastructure, the absolute fury in parts of the countryside that are being just torn up, where farms are just being uprooted so that these things can be sort of, laid on. And it is all, the attitude is, this isn't for us. It is all for London. It's all it's doing is making our lives worse. It's making our views worse. It's making the countryside less healthy, frankly, ironically. And the funny thing about solar power is, it is fantastic if you live in a part of the world that gets sufficient amounts of sun. If you do, then yes, you can actually become a net exporter. If you are in, say, Libya or Algeria, it's a genuine miracle technology. The UK is it is quite literally in the worst part of the world, in a little sort of triangle of areas, along with Iceland and the Nordic countries, where it just doesn't get anything like the same photovoltaic output as even, the rest of Europe.
Yep.
We are just unlucky in that situation. It is never going to be the solution to our energy problems, in the same way that wind simply is not in fact as plentiful as we were all led to believe. It does not work the whole time. The same with solar. It is one of those things that if you stick it on your roof, fine, you can get something out of it, in the summer especially. But is it the solution to everything? No. It is actually very expensive, and it is not as cost effective as if it were anywhere else. You could probably carpet much of the rest of the world in solar power, solar panels, and they'd do very well out of it.
Yeah.
And then us and the Nordic countries could still rely on gas. and it would have an almost negligible impact on global temperatures. It probably wouldn't have any impact, but it would allow us to all, therefore, have affordable energy. But we don't, because we are doubling down on this and on wind, two incredibly unreliable, relatively, forms of electricity. The big one, if we really want to go for entirely carbon neutral, very clean, cost-effective stuff, is nuclear. This has been known for a very long time. You have to spend a lot of money up front, but then you have the plants, and then you're in a situation like France is currently in, where you are literally able to export this stuff at a massive profit, and wholesale prices domestically are negligible. We've decided not to do that. We're going for the boondoggles of wind, and we're carpeting the countryside in solar panels. It's a really bad idea.
There are some people, when we've done phone-ins on this, who have said that they've got solar panels on their own roof, and they don't pay any bills, because they sell back their power to the electric company. Now, so that would be an argument that would kind of tacitly support Miliband's position, wouldn't it? If someone's able to do it. The problem, by the way, is that when I said, well, how much did it cost? So it cost like 20 grand or something. It's like, well, so that's 20 years worth of your energy bill. So you kind of have paid for it in quite a significant way.
If everybody does that, it's a huge outlay. It's a huge outlay, and it still doesn't create enough electricity to power basically anything than your house, if we're being completely honest here. That's, you're sort of making a very marginal gain there. But as you say, that's a hell of a long-term investment. And it doesn't work out anywhere near as economical as, say, investing all that money relatively in nuclear power stations around the country. It's incredibly expensive. So if you want to do that, fine, nobody's going to stop you if it's on your roof. But I think what people really object to is prime farmland or woodland or all sorts of other land. And it does have to be an awful lot of it.
It's like a sort of 100 football pitches worth of land per wind.
And that land is then dead. That's it's not like, oh, the little animals can live underneath the solar panels or anything like that. No, it is dead. It's dreadful for biodiversity, for our ability to grow food. It's incredibly cumbersome, very expensive, and I tell you what, a lot of the year, it's not going to generate as much electricity as we will need, which will mean we'll need to supplement it by bringing it in from overseas. Where will we get it? Probably from France with its nuclear power stations. Thanks so much for not investing in those. Or, lol, from Norway, which is drilling the gas that we could drill ourselves.
Well, we can't drill ourselves now, can we? Because they banned it. So.
Honestly, it's just...
So what does Ed Miliband know, then, that we don't know? I mean, if Ed was sitting here now and just sat there in the corner next to Reg from social media and said, like, Ed, come on, explain why we are wrong. How would he articulate that argument?
Well, I'm the wrong person to ask, because he alone seems to know what it is exactly.
Got it all worked out. He's very excited.
None of my energy bills have gone down at all. I don't know of anybody who's
has anyone's energy bill gone down?
Well, as you say, somebody who's invested all that money or got a subsidy, which means somebody else has paid for it, which means the taxpayers paid for it, their energy bills might have gone down, but that is very far from the majority of people, and actually, that's not a cost-effective thing to do. I would love to know what it is exactly about solar that is going to bring all of our energy prices down, and as I said at the top, I think people having solar panels on their roofs, if it can be done affordably, is not a bad idea, because a roof isn't actually taking up any space, it's not interfering with anything, it's just there. But it's when you're ripping up the countryside to do it, over stretches of land, swathes of land, far bigger than the average power station has. That's where people are sat there going, it's not just about the benefits such as they are, which aren't
there's other factors
you're also,
in this as well.
There's a massive cost involved there in terms of taking that land out of use for other things that it could be used for.
When I was a kid, and I'm obviously older than you, but when I was a kid, there was a house around the corner from us that had solar panels on it, and nobody knew what they were. I mean, nobody said, oh, look at that house with the solar panel. I don't even think they had that name. And I look back at that now and think, how were they ever working, these things? With what sort of infrastructure did they have back then in the 1980s to energise a house? I don't know, did they? Or
it was probably actually just an enthusiast. It was probably just somebody who was one of those people who probably today they'd buy a Tesla, a couple of years before everybody else did, or somebody who's particularly interested in technology or how something works. It might have just been that sort of thing, and that it might have been quite rudimentary. As I say, nothing wrong with solar power necessarily, and across much of the rest of the world, You know, if you were an Italian or something like that, and you've got a roof, you'd absolutely be trying to get as many solar panels as you could. Or if you were living in Spain or anywhere else, it would make a lot of sense. I'm sorry, we just live in the really small part of the world, along with, as I say, Greenland and Norway and whatever, that actually it makes not very much sense.
Doesn't make a lot of difference. Are you one of those people that actually have gone panel bound and lobbed them on your roof and don't pay any bills? I've met lots of people now that have got them on their roof, and you see them and you're walking the dog and whatever. I've never met anyone with a windmill in their garden.
I think that's socially unacceptable.
Well, I think it's socially unacceptable, and people would point and stare, correctly so. But they do sell, apparently, like kind of a sort of domestic windmill. But it's not like one of those rotary washing lines. It's not that size. I think your domestic windmill is still a pretty big affair.
Yeah,
You've sort of got to have a couple of acres, I
think it looks a little naff is the thing. If it's just in your back garden and it's going the whole time and presumably making a bit of noise, I think people will look at you and be like, that's a bit too keen. There's something passive about the solar panel, which is at the very least dignified. Whereas actually, if you've got the thing desperately having to work for you, I think people are looking at you and going, I don't know. I don't know why that is, but that's genuinely what I think it is.
Our producer, Finn, has just informed me that you can buy a windmill for 200 quid on Amazon.
Really? How
tall is it, Finn? They usually do one of the pictures is usually the measurement, isn't it? It's usually got the dimensions, specification. Look at the specifications, Finn. I'd be intrigued to know, because I'd imagine one of these things has got to go at full pelt if it's going to start supplying you with heat.
Yeah, it has to look keen.
12 kilograms in weight. 3 blades. Well, they all have 3 blades. It sounds like just a windmill for a fish tank, isn't it? That's not a...
And how much electricity does this generate, this?
Yeah. We're going to do a bit more research on that, do a deep dive into can you just buy one and stick it in your garden. But if you also look on places like Amazon and eBay, you can buy a house, can't you, for about, like, £1,000.
Yeah. All sorts of stuff.
A house you can just build, but you've got to obviously buy the land. And the house, when you look at it...
I was going to say, and in this country, you have to go through about 14,000 pages of planning.
Exactly, yeah. You buy the house, but then you've got to get the land, and the house is sort of a cupboard, really. Those self-construct things. Let's move on to this story. We're never far away from a fly-tipping tale, but this one is absolutely up there in terms of what should disturb us. Britain's biggest fly tip problem. And it's in Gloucestershire, and the length and the size of this thing is extraordinary, and nobody seems to have done anything about it, and it's become a bit of a thing for criminals and the like to simply pitch up and decide, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to drop my waste into this neck of the woods. The farm that's next, there's a farm next to it that does sort of open days, so petting days, and with goats. They do stuff at Christmas like the elf festive trail and stuff like that. Right. But on certain days, this fly tipping affair knocks out. You can, if you're watching us on our feed, you will see the enormity of this thing. It's absolutely vast. And you can smell it. And if the wind blows in the wrong direction, anyone living nearby can smell it as well. It's more than 2 acres in size. That's 10 times the size of the previous notorious fly tipping issue in Oxfordshire, which was previously said to be the biggest. So there's now sort of world records being set for fly. Yeah. I mean, what a terrible indictment on our existence in the 21st century. There's now a record for the biggest fly tip. My fly tip's bigger than your fly tip. The problem with this one dates back to 2018, when up to 50 trucks a day from all over the UK were turning up at this farm. It became a thing. If you've got stuff to drop off, get down to this place in Gloucestershire and drop it down. Tens of thousands of tons of rubbish deposited on this illegal tip. And apparently, nobody's doing anything about it. That's the bit I can't work out.
This is the thing that I've never quite understood about the insanity of British environmentalism, which is that you're prepared to completely trash your energy supply to try and affect 1% of global emissions. But the actual issue of the pollution of the very land you live on, it just seems to go by the by, because actually this sort of thing happens very frequently. And the actual effects of fly tipping and stuff like that on local ecosystems, on rivers, on woodlands and all that sort of thing, and what that does to wildlife, but by extension what then ends up getting into the food chain, because stuff does seep into the ground, which gets picked up by crops, gets eaten by animals, and does affect people, does poison people. It's almost seen as a secondary thing. Oh, that doesn't matter, because what's really important is the giant issue of global emissions. This is environmentalism. This is actually what people should be getting as caught up about as they do about energy, if not more so, because it has a tangible, short-term impact on people, on wildlife, on the very land on which they live. But you're right, nothing gets done about this because it is seen as almost a secondary problem. It's seen as, quite literally, it's a grubby business. It's dealing with criminality, which we already know our state doesn't really like to deal with. It means the actual dirty business of getting down there and cleaning it up. It means finding somewhere else to put the rubbish. That's the sort of thing, actually, that people who like to style themselves as climate warriors trying to save the planet, they'd rather not do that, because that's a bit too much like hard work.
The council, in this case, Forest of Dean Council, said it's taken action. The landowner, it said it had taken action. The landowner, who also has more than one name apparently, which makes it a little. It's a good start, isn't it? Over a serious breach of environmental regulations. Brilliant. That's their statement. We've taken action. We haven't taken any action because it's still there. It's 20 foot deep. It's 50. What did I say? 50 foot wide, and goodness knows what else. Trucks going in on a daily basis. It is a scandal, and it's acres and acres in terms of the size of this thing.
But it's, if they all know that it's there, and it's been there since 2018, you can see the trucks going in. Is it beyond the wit of the police to work out who owns the trucks? Is it beyond the wit of the police to take photographs of their registration plates? One would assume not. Why is it that people have not been identified? Why is it that they've not been prosecuted? They must know, the organisations, the gangs behind this. Even if it's not gangs, maybe it's individuals. They're perfectly capable of finding individuals who do all sorts of other things, be it post online, be it, you know, I don't know, all. So, you know, do you remember during COVID when, you know, we managed to find millions of individuals for tiny, tiny infringements who were prosecuted, who was still being prosecuted until quite recently, I believe. But this sort of thing is beyond their wit to handle? No, it's not. They just can't be bothered. That's the reality. They can't be bothered to deal with it. It's too much like hard work.
They did put some security there at one point, apparently. I think it was the same company that got the contract for the Calais border force as well. So that would explain why no one ever stop the trucks, stop the boats, stop the trucks. Nobody did. Benedict Spence is with us. More to come. Keep it here. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk. Welcome back. It is Morning Glory with Ian Collins right here on Talk. Pete the Mole says the country has the ideal and free energy source. It's called hot air, available in limitless supply, mainly from the mouths of this government. Fair point, isn't it? We could probably fuel the entire place out of number 10. He says Miliband gave away his agenda in that clip you played, that we can control, he said. And that's what it's about, control. There is a bit about this government that you do sense. They love a spreadsheet. They love a database. You know, the whole digital ID thing really appeals to them because they know where everything is and they're in charge of it. I
mean, on the subject of control, I do think there's a lot of truth in that. You know, I'm not trying to sort of go down the whole conspiracy theorist route and say that it's all about, you know, a concerted effort to control our lives more. But the thing that really sort of caught my eye a couple of weeks ago was when they announced plans to, or a desire at least, to put curbs on what people can burn in their own fireplaces.
Yes.
Yeah, and you can't, in London for instance, you can't set fire to any old piece of wood or any old piece of coal in your fireplace. It has to be smokeless. It can't actually emit any kind of smoke because this is a smoke-free zone, a smog-free zone or something.
So government-approved rubbish.
Yeah, and this is going to be rolled out nationwide at some point. Yeah. And it's a proper kind of, so the really basic thing of lighting, the most basic of human civilizational achievements, lighting a fire to keep yourself warm, is technically going to be illegal unless it meets certain very stringent criteria about the overly treated wood that you have to be able to use, or the smokeless coal, which is going to be incredibly expensive. That is an issue of control.
Well, the over-legislating of things, a caller just before Christmas made the point about 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, which have just kind of been rolled out everywhere with no real data or reason
nobody
behind
wanted
it.
them.
Nobody wanted them. They're just there. And why have you got? Well, it's safer, isn't it? You know, that's the answer that comes. But have you got any evidence for that? Yeah, there's been no accidents on this road since we had the 20-mile-an-hour. But there were no accidents before. So, you know, what are you telling us here? Of course, it's not just Labour that are full of, as I described at the beginning, giddy ineptitude. The Tories have made a lot of mistakes as well. Let's get a voice note on this from Perry.
Morning, Ian. I mean, the Conservatives do make me laugh. It's like, you know, now they're, you know, it was under them where they allowed, well, smuggled, let's use the word smuggled, 20,000 Afghans in and then gave the press a gagging order so they couldn't talk about it. They were the ones that just let this Egyptian guy become a British citizen. And now they're saying, now they've got the audacity to pretend and say, oh, this wouldn't happen if we were in charge. Vote Conservatives. They're a joke.
Yeah, and they were in charge, of course, when much of this was happening, and all those, you know, previous great leaders, Boris Johnson, who signed off this man's citizenship, and Liz Truss, when she was Foreign Secretary, was campaigning for this guy to be brought back to the UK.
Yeah, and the Conservatives have so much to answer for on this because they just didn't govern as Conservatives. And I think it's very important to understand, as I said earlier on in the show, the establishment of this country views the average person as a sort of a caveman who's incredibly violent and right-wing and needs to be handled. And they look at reform as being a sort of an offshoot of that. Reform would not exist as a political movement if the Conservatives, or Labour to be honest, because a lot of that, you know, that support is coming from the traditional working class, they would not exist if political parties did what they said they were going to do and adhered to the principles that they claimed to have. Both parties have completely surrendered any sort of moral ground on this because they have just abandoned their core principles, and so accordingly their voters are leaving for something that actually promises something that they want and looks like it might even deliver on a few of them.
Can Kemi Baden not do it?
She is doing a lot better than she was at the start. I think we have to say, give her some credit. She was dreadful at the start. She's been much better since then. I think she's doing a pretty good job. What I'd say, though, is the brand is completely toxic. The Conservative brand needs to be detoxified. I think she could do a lot to detoxify it. I think she could actually be a very successful leader of the Conservatives without ever becoming Prime Minister. And I don't think she's going to become Prime Minister. I think the party has caused too much damage to itself and the country for it to be forgiven within the time frame that she'd be looking to become Prime Minister.